How can you tell if your religious leader is truly guiding you toward a prosperous life, a life of salvation, or if they're spiritually scamming you? Consider this. If someone sees a doctor and receives multiple medicines, but then suffers harm because the person wasn't actually a doctor, just an herbalist or a fraud. Think about that on a spiritual level. Obviously, the consequences are very, very serious, and we have a great guest whom we've had the honor of hosting many times, Rabbi Ariel Groisman. Rabbi Groisman is not only in contact with many groups of people who have moved away from religious scams and have come to monotheism, to the teachings of the Torah, and the rabbi has had interactions with, I dare say, thousands of people. Maybe the rabbi can. And that's why the rabbi has done all this analysis of what the characteristics are to determine and be able to distinguish a spiritual scammer. Rabbi, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Greetings, shalom, shalom, dear Jacob, and to the whole audience, of course. Today's topic is spiritual scammers, how to identify false teachers and sectarian groups. Thank God, I have already been actively spreading Torah monotheism for more than 20 years through social networks and the internet. And throughout this time, we have been detecting, identifying, and even dismantling many groups and false teachers, both in person and online, who take advantage of people. Naive people innocently searching social networks for spiritual identity and the truth of the Torah for their lives. And they end up entangled and wrapped up in groups that are not only sectarian, brainwashing and reprogramming their personalities, but literally many criminal offenses are committed there. A person enters with a smile and sometimes leaves crying and sometimes doesn't even leave, remaining stuck in the mud of the sex. That's why it's very important to identify and flee. Stay away from these people.
Rabbi, so what would you say first to someone who wants to identify this? What are the symptoms? How can a person react to this? There are so many unknowns. Where do you start?
First of all, the blessing we have from social media, where so many millions of people get informed and educated about Torah-based spiritual life and their spiritual identity, also has its downside, its harmful side. The person who enters this world and starts searching through YouTube algorithms and recommendations doesn't have the tools to detect and identify what is authentic and what is fake. Therefore, in principle, a person must always be suspicious, since the vast majority of Jewish, Torah-related, and Noahide content is false on the internet. And just like in other disciplines, for example, when we talk about medicine, that's why Google created Google Scholar, to be able to separate what is truly academic, authoritative, and peer-reviewed from what is quackery and false medicine. In the world of Torah, even more so. And it only speaks to the prestige that the Torah has, that many want to imitate it. Surely many of you watching have already noticed this. Literally, figures from foreign Western religions disguise themselves and mask themselves with symbols, letters, and Jewish ritual objects, only to give a veneer, an image of pseudo-Jewish spirituality, and literally lead people to quack healing practices, evil practices regarding their spiritual identity, false ones that can destroy families and assets. And that's why this is so important to detect. First of all, use common sense. Common sense, let's see how this works. Also, ask for credentials. That is, anyone authorized to teach Torah in all its disciplines, Torah, Kabbalah, magical laws, must have authorization showing where they studied, where they were trained, and who endorses them. If someone claims to be a rabbi, where did they receive rabbinic ordination or their license to practice? Which community supports them? And where do they practice Judaism? In other words, Judaism is not an individual activity, but a collective one. Who authorized them to teach that topic? Check with the official channels of the countries, the Ministry of Religion, the Ministry of Education, to see if such an institution or group is recognized or not. If the person or group does not provide sufficient documentation, be suspicious. Cut it off and run.
Wow, so you're saying that from the start, you have to be skeptical. What you're saying is very interesting. I recently served in the military in Israel. It's very strange because you can even question an officer's orders. What's more, Rav, and you know this well, that in the yeshiva, if someone is studying, if a rabbi says something, you can question the rabbi. It's not like everything is just accepted as dogma. And I think this is something that is often lost among people who are searching for something spiritual. Like you say, they see a nice picture with Hebrew letters on YouTube, and they end up like that pastor from Chile who saw that the trend was Hebrew roots. He put on a kippah and talit, but continued his same business, just now wearing them. Okay, Rav. So then, okay, the person arrives, but beyond, let's say, identifying what comes next. I mean, like, how can it affect someone so much? That's what people might not really understand. Okay, I join a group and maybe it's not the right thing to do, but why would it affect me so much?
Social networks quickly foster empathy and trust. After just a few WhatsApp or email exchanges, people feel as if they've known each other for a long time. They start revealing secrets about their lives to unknown people, people who aren't qualified, and there's no confidentiality agreement like there would be with mental health professionals. And these people can end up being blackmailed, not just with personal information, not just that, but when that virtual interaction also moves into real life, there are different crimes that can be committed. For example, forced servitude, for example, all kinds of scams, for example, deception, for example, all kinds of manipulation through groups that no one endorses. If there's one thing about the Torah world, it's that it's serious. There's peer review, mutual oversight, and authorities who endorse or revoke our permits and licenses. Consequently, when someone starts through social networks to make contact with leaders, with groups, with people, with activists, or with pseudo teachers, even those who are ethnically Jewish with a spiritual identity, but they are not authorized because they are not observant of the Torah, because, as they say, they play it by ear. Since Kabbalah became fashionable, they start teaching Kabbalah without being authorized and insinuating that they have magical powers or healing abilities. That is also another crime, because in all legal systems, the art of healing is reserved for doctors, and anyone who practices this commits the offense of falsely claiming titles, honors, and quack healing practices. In many countries, it is legislated as a criminal offense. That's how people trust them, entrusting their families and their assets. And they lead people to groups that literally lead them into greater misinformation and confusion. And then they don't know how to get out because there are already many personal secrets and other personal details they've revealed, and now they're being blackmailed or absorbed by that. Even though the person says, I'm at home, nobody knows me, I watch a YouTube video or something, but this is how it starts. Without realizing it, a person starts to get involved and then doesn't know how to get out.
That is, the fear is not just about losing money, but there could also be cases, like you said, of people who trust in medicine, the so-called magical medicine of any of these sects, and it truly ends with fatal consequences in several cases. In fact, it was recently in the news that a person who joined one of those Mexican sects disappeared in a forest in Chile. A lot of stories like that are very sad. Rav, so for those who ask, let's say, okay, but this isn't like monopolizing, let's say, the official channels, because that criticism could come up. Of course, it's like here are the rabbis are just some elitist group that claims to own the truth. And to prevent people from, let's say, democratizing the wisdom of the Torah or whatever, so they say that people should only go to their channels, to their, let's say, forums, and they look down on other sources that might come up. So how would you respond to an accusation like that?
Just like those people, when they go to see a doctor, they want to be sure that the doctor is actually a doctor and no one is authorized to diagnose and provide treatment except for doctors. And the same goes for architects. That's why states issue licenses and prohibit others who aren't qualified from performing those tasks or actions. But above all, the Torah itself gives exclusivity to the sages and to those whom they authorize to interpret the Torah and no one else. Deuteronomy 17, for example, when you can't issue a legal ruling and you don't know how to judge, you must present yourself before the priests of the tribe of Levi, before the judicial authority of that time. You will present the case to them, and they will issue a ruling on the matter. You must proceed according to the ruling they give you there. You must be careful to do exactly as they instruct you. Proceed according to the law they give you. Do not turn aside from what they tell you, to the right or to the left. The man who rebels and refuses to obey will be put to death. Moreover, the only authority to interpret and deliver the Torah and to explain it, to develop programs and methods of teaching, belongs to all the servants of Israel, both for Jewish laws and Noahide laws. Just as it is in Maimonides, Laws of Mamrim, chapter 1, just as it is in Sheva Mitzvot Hashem, the 7 divine commandments. And likewise, any discipline has authority. Authority can, for example, grant permission, issue licenses, or authorize people, even non-Jews. Noahide teachers who have moral conduct, and it is proven, and they know how to study for a long time, and also how to teach. But thank God there is authority. Authority does not mean not democratizing, but rather the opposite, taking responsibility for the teaching of the Torah, just like in any, for example, religion. No one is going to tell a leader of the religion how to interpret their books. Well, no one can tell the servants of Israel how, except the servants of Israel themselves. And within this are all the disciplines and sub-disciplines of the Torah, like Kabbalah, like ethics, like law, like Tanakh, and everything else.
Of course, one of the premises in the Torah is that the Torah is oral, so really, that's why sometimes people ask me, what is the best translation of the Torah? That's why I say it doesn't matter that much. What matters is that the person teaching you has received it faithfully from generation to generation, and he will transmit it to you regardless of the translation you have on paper. Because the opposite also happens. People confident it's the best translation reach opposite conclusions by doing the reverse process. What is it? From themselves to the text instead of from the text to themselves? Yes, well, I think so. So, Rabbi, what would you recommend to someone? Because, let's say, there's also the point of view. No, sometimes you have to fall in order to wake up. Yes, it's a bit masochistic, but what do you recommend to someone who is really asking themselves, well, I'm in this religion. I would be interested in exploring Judaism a bit. Where do I go? What do I do? Can I contact Rabbi Ariel Groisman? Rabbi Groisman, yes. I'll share Rabbi Ariel Groisman's pages and contacts for anyone interested. Also, a list of videos we have with Rabbi Ariel Groisman discussing recommended books, the conversion process, and a lot of topics about Noahides. End of parenthesis. But what would you say to someone who is in this whole process of searching and is really afraid or not afraid of joining a sect? What would be your first words?
First, I'd advise them to research locally, contact the authorities or Ministry of Religious Affairs, and check for synagogues or authorized Jewish institutions to request information in their city. If none are in their city, they should search in their country. Although there are few Jews and the community is managed differently than other religions, it's not easy to access. However, they should go through the institutional and legal channels of their country so that they only receive instruction from authentic Jewish institutions and communities and not from any kind of falsehood. If there are no Jews in your neighborhood, there is no Judaism. Know that the person in your city cannot practice Judaism because Judaism cannot be practiced just anywhere, only where there are practicing Jews. And this happens a lot, from the virtual world to in-person situations. In different places, you see that from one day to the next, they take a garage and make a kind of synagogue and start holding Hebrew-style services and all that. You should know this is completely false. If you're interested in Judaism, connect with authentic rabbis and Jewish institutions. But how can you tell if they're authentic? The ministries of religious affairs and foreign affairs in each country will announce it through official channels. Ask experienced scholars and ask those experienced scholars and ask the Jewish people you may know. They know them, they can vouch for their conduct, they keep each other in check, they vouch for each other. And ask those authorities you may know. I don't want to mention names, but in general, who is authorized and who is not, even Jewish people who are truly Jewish. But that doesn't mean Judaism endorses their teachings. What they teach could be false, they may not observe the Torah, or they may distort it. They might take certain parts of the Torah and turn it into something it's not. That also happens a lot. Don't be influenced by appearances. Symbols, letters, hats, and robes should all be disregarded. You should know that the vast majority are not genuine precisely because of the great prestige that the Torah has. Things get distorted because of this. And mainly, once a person recognizes that behind this there is a teacher, a rabbi, a female teacher, authentic Jewish institutions, they should learn from them. If someone wants to follow the path that the Torah indicates for non-Jewish people, they should follow the Noahide laws and the entire system of the covenant of the rainbow. If they want to follow the path of Judaism, they should study Jewish laws for Jews. They should practice Judaism with guidance from an expert rabbi. That is the way of the Torah.
So here comes an issue that has sometimes happened to him. Suppose this person arrives, discovers a recognized Jewish community or synagogue, and has done their research. He knocks on the door and the community doesn't seem very willing to open up as people might expect. Many people think anyone who visits a synagogue will be warmly welcomed. What does the person do in this case? If in fact in Judaism we tend to be closed off.
First, understand that the Jewish community operates differently from other religions, so applying experiences from other religions to Judaism is a mistake. Assume that if the Jewish communities in your city don't open their doors to you, it means that it will be very difficult for you to practice Judaism in that place. Therefore, virtual channels of scholars, institutions, and authentic websites such as Filosofia Judea, filosofiajudea.com are valid ways to start learning. If, along with practicing the Noahide laws and building a Noahide community with guidance in your city, you also want to practice Judaism, you should know it will be very difficult there. Judaism can only be practiced where there are enough practicing Jews. Many Spanish-speaking countries have few Jews and even fewer who practice. Try researching how many Jews there are in your countries and cities. Of those, roughly half practice and half do not. The fact that there is a practicing Jew does not mean, first, that they are knowledgeable or that they are authorized to explain the Torah. And second, that they have the teaching skills to explain the Torah. Right? Non-Jews, how do you know if someone has the teaching skills or not? It's very simple. If they use Hebrew words without explaining, it's unhelpful because people won't know the meaning. Thank God, many wise rabbis explain numerous Jewish laws, but only for Jews, not non-Jews. The teaching method is completely different. So you have to go to those wise men and teachers who dedicate themselves to teaching Judaism to Jews, or Noahide laws, or the spiritual identity of the Torah to non-Jews, with a specific teaching method for that.
Arevi. Now, let's say I was trying to put myself in the shoes of a person who is not Jewish, who comes to the conclusion that the Torah is true. And it sounds very... I don't want this to sound discouraging to the person listening to this video, but I want to tell them not to give up on the path to monotheism. I'm not telling you that you have to convert or not. That's not my concern. What I'm trying to say is that what Rav Groisman just described sounds really difficult, challenging. What do I do? What if they tell me no and that's it? Rabbi Groisman just told me that there are hardly any practicing Jews, and those who are don't necessarily know either. I want you to know that here we have Rav Groisman, who I believe is a great light where he is because he really deals with these kinds of issues. I think you can find him when you visit his social media, and he will clear up a lot of your doubts. I say this because I know that the people watching this video are having all these alarms go off. Rav, and let's say moving on to a person who has been through a cult, for example, can they heal those wounds? Should they forgive? Should they hate? I mean, the person who fell into the spiritual scammers cult and managed to get out, thank God. What should their relationship with that past be? See it as bad, see it as wrong, condemn it.
First, if they witness criminal offenses, they should consult a lawyer and file a criminal complaint, as this is serious. People need to be warned. Many see this as innocent, but it's actually a criminal offense. That's appropriate. If there are witnesses and evidence, a report should be filed. But the main thing is to disconnect, block all of that, and start cleansing yourself from that spiritual poison and emotional toxicity, and start studying authentic Torah monotheism. Let them start studying. Giving the foundations of monotheistic faith, monotheistic ethics, how to pray as a monotheist. There is a lot of content, and there are many welcoming groups authorized by rabbis in all Spanish-speaking countries that will help and accompany you. It's a phenomenon where the very virtue of social media is also its downside. But you have to keep your eyes open, stay alert, and not just let yourself be carried away like that. Instead, be critical, use common sense, and connect with authentic groups that will lead you down the right path. They will be there to support you and guide you emotionally. And thank God, there are hundreds of thousands who come closer to authentic Jewish institutions, to authorized Noahide groups, to develop their spirituality with their families in a full, abundant, and joyful way.
Yes, Raf, everything you say seems very natural to me, but for some people, it's strange to think that you have to use common sense. But yes, you have to use it. Thank you, Raf, for your words. You already know you can stay in touch through the respective pages. Greetings to everyone and kisses to Raf. May we see each other again in the future.
Likewise, dear Jacob, blessings to all. May the light of the Torah shelter embrace and illuminate us.